researchers with the opportunity to work collaboratively with the National Institute of Health All of Us Research Program to gain access to and study extensive health data from diverse populations, especially those underrepresented in biomedical research. This esteemed group of individuals serves as a voice and joins the conversation to discuss topics such as the benefits, challenges, and relevancy of minority research and researchers. They have access to the All of Us Research Program data browser and Researcher Workbench, two tools that provide insight on how lifestyle, behavior, environment, family health history, and other factors contribute to why people get sick or stay healthy. Our featured panelists for tonight include Dr. Liza Joy Burton, a member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, Dr. Ashley Noel Carter, a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and Mr. Agbod Shobali, a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity. These are our members of the D9 Researchers Pipeline that will be enlightening us tonight. But first, I'll start with introducing Dr. Burton because she's first up to share her why for why she's a part of the D9 Researchers Pipeline. Dr. Burton is a clinical scientist at Georgia Institute of Technology, developing molecular tests for various diseases. She received her PhD from Clark Atlanta University, where her dissertation focused on prostate and breast cancer. She has a profound interest in health disparities and cancers, with exploration of natural products as potential interventions in cancer prevention and treatment. This approach reflects the holistic view of healthcare, incorporating traditional knowledge and natural remedies into the scientific understanding of cancer. Her research interest not only delves into the molecular intricacies of cancer, but also seeks to bridge the gap in healthcare, accessibility, and outcomes. Her interest in this research is driven by the effects both prostate and breast cancer have had on her family, especially her family who live overseas, and the treatment options or clinical trials are not always accessible unless you live near a major city. Thank you, Dr. Burton, for joining us, and please share with us your why.
Hello and good evening, everyone, and thank you, Sora Jones, for that introduction. As mentioned, my name is Dr. Lisa Joy Burton, and I hail from the city of Atlanta. And one of my reasons why for becoming involved in the D9 pipeline is for the research that is done, especially in cancer. It's beneficial to have more people who look like us to do the work. I go to a lot of different conferences, and there's less than 1% who look like us who are involved in presenting the research. So why not be involved in the All of Us program to actually push forth and get more minorities into the research and more minorities involved in the research? And I'll have more later. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Burton. That is very, very good when you're talking about making sure that we have other folks that are engaged in the research and participating in the research. Now we will have Dr. Carter share with us her whys. But first, let me introduce her. Dr. Ashley Noel Carter was born in Atlanta, Georgia. She has a Bachelor of Science degree in Agriculture and a minor in Spanish from the University of Georgia. She's a Master of Science degree in Clinical Nutrition from the University of Alabama, Birmingham, and a Doctor of Philosophy degree in Human Sciences with a focus in nutrition science from Florida State University. In addition, she has a graduate certificate in Measurements and Statistics from FSU. She has experience being a teaching assistant at FSU and an adjunct instructor at Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University. She has also served as a mentor for various research programs and initiatives such as the Lewis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation program and FSU Undergraduate Research Opportunity Program. Furthermore, she has experience as a chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear military officer. Due to her military service, she has received a humanitarian award in addition to the Armed Forces Service Medal because of her efforts to help communities during the coronavirus pandemic. Additionally, Dr. Carter has experience teaching science, which has inspired her to participate in the Army Educational Outreach Program research experiences for STEM educators and teachers, and serves on the AEOP Council. In addition to teaching science, she is an online graduate professor. Her research interests are focused on health disparities and confounding factors such as education. Dr. Carter has published research in the American Journal of Cardiovascular Disease and presented research across the United States. She wants to contribute to inform about health disparities to help with longevity and better quality of life outcomes. She is also a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and serves on communities for various organizations to further her passions and interests of helping communities. Wow, Dr. Carter, you are truly impressive. So please share with us your why.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Definitely, my why is impacting communities in America. I am glad to be a participant in this initiative. I want to increase the knowledge outcomes as well. Having diverse research and researchers can have a positive impact in many ways. That is the reason why I've had the opportunity and why I have served as a mentor for various programs, just wanting to continuously have a positive impact. It is important to have diverse researchers so we can contribute to knowledge and discovery. I think we deserve to be in this space and also contribute to the discoveries and shape the future. As Dr. Burton stated, when you go to large conferences, usually there are not a lot of minorities, in particular African Americans. So definitely, I think it's really important to have more diverse researchers and African American researchers when it comes to discovery and shaping the outcomes of society, especially when it comes to health.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. Last but certainly not least, Agbold Shwabali is a graduate of Mercer University with a background in neuroscience and Africana studies. As an aspiring physician, his research focuses on reducing health disparities in minority communities. He currently works as a clinical research coordinator at Cincinnati's Children's Hospital and joins us through Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. He has an extensive background in behavioral medicine and genetic research, focusing on pediatric populations and those typically underserved by biomedical research. Community-based research and population health perspectives guide his investigations of the implications of social determinants of health on minority well-being. As a clinical researcher, his current emphasis has been integrating genome-informed risk assessments into modern primary care medicine. With those of African descent lacking genomic data in national databases, he aims to continue diversifying the efficacy of medicine to best serve the ever-growing diversity of society. Now we will have Mr. Shwabali share his why for being a part of the D9 researchers.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Stacy, for that introduction. My name is Abwade Shobowale. Like you mentioned before, I'm a clinical research coordinator at Cincinnati Children's and also an aspiring physician. I'm actually applying to medical school right now and hope to matriculate in the fall of 2024. So my why for research in general, and then for my participation in the Divine Nine Researchers Pipeline in general, has just been led by my clinical interests, my clinical values as far as aspiring to be a physician. I think biomedical research and my clinical interests and the health of overall communities go hand in hand. I think from my personal experiences through conducting clinical research at Cincinnati Children's, whether that was as a student or in my role now in our Center for Autoimmune Genomics and Etiology research. I mean, health disparities touches research and clinical aspects the same. And I think my plan for my clinical aspirations is to find ways to best integrate these social implications through research, and then also translate that into my clinical practice as well to further improve healthcare disparities in African American communities specifically.
Thank you. That is truly impressive. Our three researchers have some truly impressive agendas, and I'd like to have the three of them come on so we can have a panel discussion. I have a couple of questions that I have lined up for the three of them, and they can choose who wants to go first. Lest they be voluntold. So, when we're thinking about your research interest, can one of you describe the catalyst for your research?
Sure, I definitely will. It was kind of mentioned in my introduction. One of the biggest thing I have noticed, if you have family who are of West Indian descent, they have a tea for everything. There's a tea, if you give a cough, they have a specific tea. And my thought has always been, there has to be a way for the research on the natural teas to say that they actually have an effect. So that was one of my biggest catalysts for my interest on natural products, especially on prostate and breast cancer, because that was something that run rampant in my family. And I also think about the people overseas compared here to America. If you don't live close to the city, there's usually only one hospital. And they're also more likely to change their diet than to go into the doctor and receive all the chemo treatments. So that's one of the biggest catalysts for my research interests.
That's amazing. Who wants to go next?
I don't mind going next. Kind of touching on my introduction as well. My interest in genetic research actually is only recent. Going through my undergrad, I absolutely hated genetics. That class was my least favorite of all. But I had the opportunity to come to Cincinnati Children's and just kind of hop onto my clinical team right now, but more so as a means of actually recruiting more African Americans into genetic testing and genetic research, just because my team specifically was having kind of not at the biggest success in recruiting African Americans for rightful reasons, with African Americans' lack of trust in biomedical research, but then genetics specifically. So my job was kind of to help recruit and build our numbers, specifically in the African American community, and then divulge some more information on genetic testing and then why this is actually beneficial to them. So although I wasn't the most well-versed in genetics, I think my role here in past years definitely helped me increase that. Learning about polygenic risk scores and monogenic risk scores in pediatrics and adults as well. So polygenic risk scores, or polygenic risk, excuse me, are things like your asthma, your type 1, type 2 diabetes is what we are assessing our participants for. And we basically map the specific your genes to basically other genes that say, okay, you have this gene at this site, this site, this site, and we compare it to what we know of certain markers that are indicative of having these certain conditions. So that's where the polygenic risks come from for those specific conditions. But for the cancers, things we're looking at, like breast cancer in African Americans specifically, is really prevalent. So we try to give some more information about breast cancer. And once we actually divulge this monogenic risk to participants, we're able to upload this to their electronic medical records and have these conversations with not only them, but their primary care physicians to kind of help mitigate them actually contracting it, because it's not saying you do have breast cancer, but saying, okay, because of your lifestyle and because of your genetics, most importantly, you are at higher risk for these certain conditions, so stuff like that. So these conditions that are really prevalent in African American communities has kind of driven me to be like, okay, genetic medicine and really being in tune with our genetics is something that is ultimately the future of medicine, and hopefully something that I can continue to advocate for and support in my clinical and research endeavors in the future.
Okay,
Thank
I'll go
you.
next.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, so what inspired me is definitely knowing how chronic diseases impact the African American community, knowing how they were also impacting my family as well. And so I became really interested in researching diabetes as well as hypertension, as I knew these were impacting the African American community as well as my own family. And so I started to do research, and as mentioned, I published research in the American Journal of Cardiovascular Disease about chronic diseases and the impact they were having on African Americans, and about diabetes as well, contributing to cardiovascular disease among African Americans. And then I started to present this research from Boston, Massachusetts to San Francisco, California, as I became really interested in disseminating and sharing this information. So I felt like my family is what led me to want to find out more about diabetes, because sometimes among African Americans, it may seem as though, this is something that all African Americans are going to get. But we know that those are preventable through certain measures. And so I think it's really important to disseminate that information, that there could perhaps be a decrease in the prevalence of chronic diseases that the particular community is facing.
Wow, thank you. That's amazing. So it seems like there's a connector between looking at our family history and things that we learned and were interested in college that may have helped you with your research interests. So that's very important. So I know that the three of you are involved currently in research. And so, can you share any anticipated outcomes of your research? Is there one specific area that you could talk about? What do you think is going to happen because of what you're researching?
Well, I'll go ahead. Some of my research has actually been published of what I've looked at. One of my areas was using a muscadine grape, and I've actually been able to see that the grape and all of its whole ingredients can have effect on prostate and breast cancer cells. I want to be also, for my research, especially for natural products, a lot of people like to pull out the one main ingredient. Well, you think about for natural products, it is actually the whole product that has more of an effect than the specific ingredient. So that's one thing that I anticipate hopefully will be a message that is sent through for my research. And then also, we know that, most people using chemotherapies, but to level the two together, chemotherapy and probably some natural products, to also lessen the effects of chemo. So those are some anticipated outcomes of my research.
Thank you.
Yeah, so obviously I think I'm in just a different stage of my academic career than our two other panelists. So my research is hopefully going to be able to pivot here in the next coming months and years as I enter medical school. But from the current research I'm doing in genetics, I just kind of hope to, I guess the hope of the entire research is to get genetic medicine and internal medicine, primary care medicine on the same page, as far as realizing that genetics do play a large risk in our risk for certain conditions, and how we can better just kind of pair that with the lifestyles that we lead, our socioeconomic status, things like that, to generate our overall risk, but also help us to actually mitigate the likeliness of contracting these diseases. So as I go into medical school, I do plan to continue using my genetic background and leveraging that to kind of investigate some more specific chronic illnesses, such as renal cancer, renal failure, specifically in African American men, and looking at specific genes that may cause that as well.
Thank you so much for that.
So definitely I want to make sure that I'm contributing new information and novel information. So definitely I want to continue along the track of diabetes and chronic diseases. but also continue to look at confounding factors or underlying factors that could also be impacting the health of African Americans. Definitely there is this growing interest around mental health. So definitely I think it could be important to look at how there could be a connection between mental health and chronic diseases as well.
Oh, wow, that is fascinating. I would not have thought about that. So I guess that's why you all are the researchers and the doctors, right? So, is there anything else you'd like to share around your research that could be helpful before we go into um, this last question and before as we prepare to open up to the audience for them to ask questions?
I definitely will. One thing, especially as I was going through my dissertation, because I wanted to do cancers of health disparities, it was very hard to get samples from African Americans. So I would actually to say, if you know of a clinical trial, get involved in a clinical trial. If there's just, you see them all the time. Sometimes you see the advertisement on buses, you'll see the advertisements on TV for people to participate. If you're a minority, participate, because the people doing the research, and we want to be able to say, hey, this can specifically help minority populations, but if we don't have the research or the people who are participating, then we really can't say that. So if you see it, enroll, please. Thank you.
Very, very important stuff. Any other comments before I ask this other question?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on what Dr. Burton said. So as far as a lot of research being conducted right now, or in the history of really biomedical research, a lot of it has not been tailored towards African Americans or those underserved and minority communities. So the results and outcomes that we pull from these research questions and outcomes isn't necessarily going to be representative or indicative of how we should kind of expect those to be shown or replicated in African American communities. So the same outcomes that we see for a large population, research population for white and European descendants isn't going to be indicative of, okay, this is how we saw things manifest in white people. This is also how it's going to be manifesting in African Americans. So like Dr. Burton said, participation in research, not just conducting the research, is just as important so that we can, on the back end, obviously help that help benefit African American communities and other minority communities as well.
Thank you so much. Well, we do have one more question before we open it up to the audience. And that question is, what advice would you give to other members of the D9 community or the people in general who are a part of this program tonight who are interested in pursuing medical advice, medical research? So what would you tell somebody? How do you get started?
I think on the last part, Dr. Carter was gonna say something, so I want to make sure she has an opportunity to say that before we move on.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I was just going to agree that research in African Americans is very important. And I know I only did my research specifically on African Americans to contribute information. But also I would say, if someone's interested in research, they should seek out professional development opportunities, connect with professionals in that space. If they're reading a research article and it's speaking to them and it seems very interesting, then there could be contact information on that research article, and they can connect with different professionals in that manner as well. So I think it's important to find out ways to engage in research and attend events, opportunities, and things of that nature in order to find out about how to get further involved.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. So other advice from our panelists on how to get involved?
Yeah, I would like to say that I think, as you can kind of see with our panelists, like research happens on so many different levels, whether that is your PhDs, whether that's people looking to get into more clinical areas, or people just out starting their academics in undergrad. Research can happen at any point. So I would say don't let where you are in your career or where you hope to be kind of be a deterrent, because you really can't start anywhere, and even with anything. Health disparities and health education really does touch so many things. So even if you're looking at mental health, if you're looking at certain conditions, if you're interested in genetics, whatever you're interested in, even if it's art, for example, I think there are plenty of ways to tie that into the underserved communities, especially in America. And I think as far as pursuing a career in whether that be medicine or biomedical research, I think just starting and kind of having the idea of where you want to go, but really having that drive to kind of impact your communities back home is really important.
Yeah, definitely research can be on any level, definitely for sure. I know I sparked my interest actually before college. I was a young scholar researcher at University of Georgia before I started my first semester of university. So definitely it can start on any level. It can start before college. It can start in undergrad. A lot of universities have their Center for Undergraduate Research Opportunities or undergraduate research opportunity programs. So there are so many professors usually at universities who are doing research, and they sometimes may have like undergrads in their lab. And then of course, research can happen at the graduate level, postgraduate level. There are many ways to engage in research at different levels, for sure.
Okay.
I have two pieces of advice. One, build your resilience. Allow the no to be your catalyst to keep going. For my field, you can sit down at the bench and do research for 3 years, write that pretty paper, get it peer reviewed, and they'd be like, no, we don't want to publish. But you have to be able to say, you know what, there's something to my research. So you have to always have that resilience to keep going. Your goal is your goal, so make sure that you are the proponent of your goal and find people through all stages who can help you reach your goal. They don't have to be at the school that you're at. They can be anywhere, and you can reach out to them to allow them to be a mentor. Like the other researchers have actually said, you know, make sure you look for all opportunities, but outside of looking out for opportunities, build yourself, have good communication skills, start reading research articles early. I think I started reading research articles when I was a volunteer at the hospitals, just to go into the library, just pick it up. I may not know what the words were, but it was, hey, let me read this. Maybe one day I'll be able to, you know, do this. My always favorite thing was to read the back of the ingredients. And it wasn't until I took organic chemistry, I actually knew what they were. So start early. And the biggest thing, have fun while you're doing it.
Thank you. I have one more quick question for one or all three of you. When did you know that you were going to be a researcher? Like, when did the light bulb come on? Or is there a time that you can reflect back to and think about something that may have happened in high school or elementary school? Or just like, how did you know that this is what you were going to do or what you wanted to do?
I think I can go ahead and answer that. I think for me, mind you, I'm about a year and a half removed from college. So my third year in undergrad, I was actually able to do a summer undergraduate research fellowship at Cincinnati Children's. And prior to this, my only real research experiences were in the lab for like a organic chemistry or bio 2 lab situation where that's a part of the course. So I knew just from that that lab wet research wasn't really the thing that I was interested in, but I knew that applying to medical school and things like that, like I did need to have some research experiences. So I applied to this research fellowship and was able to get in. And the research that I was doing actually ended up being community-based research, as well as some of the wet lab research, which I wasn't the typical fan of that, but doing this community-based research and seeing like, okay, there's a whole other avenue of research that is still scientific and important to clinical outcomes and in the field of biomedical research as well. So I think that really sparked my interest in research as far as like, okay, it doesn't necessarily have to be wet lab research to make it translational research for it to actually help improve the community. So that has kind of broadened my research perspective as far as like, okay, I can still apply the same methodology as far as thinking like, okay, improving health disparities, not just in community-based research, but you can also bring this to biomedical research, whether you're researching cancers or your type 2 diabetes, whatever it may be. This fact of health disparities and improving community health is kind of always going to be intertwined with this biomedical research that I will be doing. So that's kind of what sparked me and also opened my horizons to other research as well.
Thank you for sharing.
I can actually say for myself, and I may not look it, but I'm 46, but when I was in high school and 14 years old, I remember seeing my first cell move under the microscope. I was hooked. I said, like, wow, what is this? Why is this happening? And then expanding my science knowledge. Now, research was not put forth because that wasn't a career that most people talked about. But as I went further along, people were like, I found out they say, hey, research is something you can do to coincide with going to medical school. Well, then I got hooked on the research, and then the medical school kind of went to the wayside.
Thanks for sharing.
Oh, for me, thinking back to high school, I had some mentors, some science researchers who would come to my high school, my predominantly Black African American high school, every week. And mentoring is so important. I am so appreciative of these mentors I had the opportunity to engage with on a regular basis. I'll never forget at my high school graduation, they gave me a book as a gift, and I am still so very appreciative of that moment. And so it feels as though I have somewhat followed in their footsteps in a way. So I feel like having mentors definitely is a positive impact, and I feel like they are the ones who encouraged me to also be a young scholar researcher before high school. And during research, before high school, I had the opportunity to actually do some hands-on experiences. And I felt like, wow, I was really doing research at that time, thinking back. And so that definitely had a huge impact on me. And I'm so appreciative of people who have had the opportunity to come into my life and have such a positive impact on me where I can continuously reflect on those great moments.
Yeah, and I want to add to that. I think,
Okay.
especially in biomedical research, mentorship is so important just because it can open doors that you would have never thought of as far as, okay, now you have an opportunity to do some more research. Now you have an opportunity to have your research be the spotlight at a presentation or just open opportunities for you to advance to that next level of research. So I think mentorship, I'm sure it's the same across a lot of different specialties, but in biomedical research is going to be very, very important, and I think will help in the long run for sure.
Thank you guys for sharing. Amazing, just really amazing to hear your stories and understand, when you first fell in love with research and how it's manifested itself into your careers and your future careers. We've learned a lot about participating in research as well as becoming researchers from the three of you. But before we bring this webinar to a close, we would like to invite the audience to submit questions to the guests in the chat. We don't want anyone left here with any lingering questions. I did see a couple of comments, but if there are questions, please feel free to share them now. We're waiting for some questions from anyone.
Someone mistakenly messaged some of the co-hosts. So one of the questions was for Dr. Burton, and they wanted to know, you talked about growing up Caribbean and that resonated in terms of the teas. And so in your research, or are you still researching, is there any strength in some of those teas that you mentioned? The audience wants to know.
Yes, some of it was not able to publish because I actually took the string of teas through a couple of tests. When I was working on my master's, I did toxicology work with the teas to see how they affect the environment. And I do see some good things that, they could be used, but I will say cancer is a billion-dollar business.
Wow. So we have a couple of questions. One is, what are your thoughts on holistic solutions? Not specific to anyone that I can tell.
I almost want to say might be specific to what I do, because I think that was mentioned in my introduction.
Mhm.
As far as using natural things to cure big diseases, it's possible, because you think about a lot of people, they get a diagnosis and they change their diet and things, things change. So I believe it's very possible, but we also got to think of before, during, and after. We can't wait till we're during and saying, you know what, let me change. Oh, okay, I've had my diagnosis. I have been, cured through, medicine. And then once the medicine is over, I go back to what I was doing. We need to think of long-term solutions, not just waiting to say, hey, that holistic view is continuous. So that's kind of the answer to my question, to the question I have.
I agree with that. Definitely, nutrition is important early on, of course. So you definitely don't want to wait until it's too late. We want to already, making sure we're doing everything we're supposed to do as far as the holistic approach, because we know certain diseases are preventable, and I feel that way just knowing my family history. Having a holistic approach can be very helpful.
Okay. So we have another question, and actually there are two questions, but the first part is, in this day and age, are there trials that are gender specific within the African American community?
I know I started my research during African American males and females. That's what I had published in American Journal of Cardiovascular Disease. But then also my dissertation, I focused specifically on African American women, since I had started to see differences between males and females in the African American community. So I think sometimes the research does need to be gender specific, because we know like hormones can be different between males and females, and that can impact health as well. So there are some underlying factors that may contribute to differences between males and females.
Any
Now,
other
if you
comments?
actually find out those different clinical trials, you can actually go to a website, clinicaltrials.gov, and you can actually put in search criteria to find out if it's just gender specific. Now, they try not to just put it down to one culture group, because you need a comparison. Because let's say if it works in Europeans and not in African Americans, that's something they need to know. So usually it's mixed.
Okay. Another question is, in your experience, have you come across trials for pre-existing or prevention? I'm assuming of diseases.
Definitely, I feel like there could be some research on prevention, especially when it comes to nutrition and the holistic approaches, because we know having certain nutrients in the diet can have a positive impact, and maybe those may reduce the prevalence of certain diseases.
Okay.
Yeah, I also agree there should be more research on, yes, we do a lot of research on the disease itself, but what about those who may be in the same family? And let's say I didn't get the disease, so I want to call them the normal people. So there also might be some trials where people are looking at the normal genetic makeup compared to the genetic makeup of somebody with the cancer. So there are some, you would have to really search for those. But to me, that's good research to say, you know what, this is what it should look like normally. And then what happens when the cancer happens. So you could probably find some of those.
Okay. What has been the largest obstacle in working to reach or impact diverse populations?
I think I can go ahead and answer that one. So for me, I'm actively recruiting for my genetic risk study. I think having discussions as far as like, okay, especially in African American communities, persuading and just kind of discerning some more information as to what research is happening and kind of building that trust back up in the communities is ultimately the I think the biggest obstacle that research faces today, especially just because there is a lot of mistrust in African American communities, but of course other minority communities just throughout the history of biomedical research, and that's just the unfortunate reality. But excuse me. But I think actually giving information about whatever the specific research is that you're conducting and truly understanding that, okay, or giving them the understanding that this is something that will benefit you and benefit the community as a whole, and really assuring them that, okay, yes, this is kind of what's happened in the past. And I think coming from a researcher that looks like them, that is from the same background as them, has been helpful, especially for me when I'm recruiting in the communities or in specific clinics in our hospital, is really beneficial. And I think I have that advantage to some of my team members just because I am the only African American on my team recruiting for this. And I think to that same point, genetics is always a touchy subject for anybody. And I know when I speak with families, they're like, oh, well, I don't want my genetics just out there, my DNA just out there and whatever. And I think telling them and explaining the safeguards that research has in place now is really important as well. And then just kind of reiterating what we hope to find from this research and like I said, the safeguards that are put in place to protect the PHI patients and safety as well.
Yes, definitely it can be important to do community-based participatory research. So having people who are established in the communities helping to lead the efforts when it comes to research. I felt like that was beneficial for me being involved in the African American community and then disseminating information about the importance of being involved in a research study. I felt like that had helped my studies when it came to African American health.
I think for myself, I've learned the big words, but I like to take those big words and make them small ones. The more others understand of what the research is in their language, the more likely they are better to participate. Like if I say to someone, you know, you can go to the muscadine field and pick some muscadines, add that to your diet, make some muscadine wine, you know, might have little benefits than saying, you know what, you need to go to the doctor. And the first word you say, going to the doctor, we're like, no, thank you. So being able to do the research and actually give them the information works a little better. And then they might be more likely to investigate going to the doctor, wanted to participate in different things, you know, to make their health better.
Okay. Here's another question. Is there any research on limiting the amount of meat in our diets?
Definitely, I feel like limiting the amount of meat in the diet can be very helpful and beneficial. Definitely, it seems to be like there is an increase in people reducing their meat intake as well. I think that's happening in America. A lot of people are doing meatless Mondays and doing other initiatives to reduce their red meat intake and other meat intake. So I think that can definitely be beneficial, and it's important to look further in the research regarding that, because a lot of meat may contain a lot of fat, especially saturated fat. So definitely it's important to be careful. But of course, red meat contains the iron that can also be beneficial. But definitely reducing the meat intake can be beneficial. And I feel like in America, people are reducing meat, because I feel like that's impacting the agriculture and that particular industry. And it also reduces our carbon footprint as well.
That's important stuff right there. I think we should all consider reducing the amount of meat in their diet. It can be a little tough, but I think that's a worthwhile effort. We have one last question, and then I'm going to read a comment from one of our guests. Do you think there's a stigma attached to participating in the medical trials? For an example, only people short on money do stuff like that.
I think it definitely can be seen as a stigma in certain communities. I think for me, as we like a lot of researchers, a lot of research studies do provide money and compensation as an incentive, but also for appreciation. Okay, thank you for participating in our study and contributing to our findings and our outcomes. I think more oftentimes than not, I would like to think that people are doing it because they do want to find out more about their health and also improve the health of whatever the outcomes may be of the study for the participants and the communities that we are trying to help improve. So, but I do know that there are people that do participate in these studies specifically for compensation. I think as a researcher, we are aware of this stuff, but I don't think that we should allow that to kind of deter us from conducting the research. And we will always compensate our participants no matter whatever the need may be. So I think there are benefits and stuff to that. And I think no matter what the trial is, the medical trial or the research study itself, I believe all studies are to have this thing that's not coercive. So the money is never a coercive factor. It's more so always just an token of appreciation for their participation in the study.
Okay. Any other responses to that question? Okay. Well, I want to read a statement from May Sandberg. She says, I am not a researcher, but I find I can support research by sharing studies and encouraging people to read them. To your point, Dr. Burton, especially in this age of social media misinformation, sharing founded and verified research is what I can do to support yours and other researchers' hard work. I shared the recent study, AOURP study on alcohol and breast cancer patients, how patients need more information and support to decrease or eliminate alcohol during and post-treatment. Thank you for your comment, Ms. Sandberg. I think that is very.
I'm here to support.
Thank you so much. This has been a really wonderful conversation, and I hate to bring it to a close, but we want to be respectful of everyone's time. But before we do that, I want to first thank our panelists for coming, sharing their information, helping us understand their why, their motivation for the research that they do, and the amazing way that they're going to continue to impact the world with their research. And Mr. Schwabali, I can't wait till you become doctor. So we look forward to celebrating you as you move in that direction. That will be amazing for all of us. So we come to an important time. So please don't go before you all do this for me. I need you all to do me a favor and take out your phones. And if you're on your phone, maybe we can drop the link into the chat. But I need you all to complete a quick survey. I promise it won't take but a minute or two. And Mr. Jackson, can you put that survey up on the screen, the QR code? It's just a quick survey. I promise it's painless. And that goes for you guys out on Facebook Live too. So it's not just the people that are inside the Zoom, but if you're on Facebook Live, please take a moment to take this quick quiz. While you guys are completing this quiz, I hope everybody has had a moment to snap on that QR code really quickly. I want to thank you all for taking the time to join us this evening. It is our hope that you all are leaving with some great takeaways and a desire to gain more insight to the All of Us program. And of course, for more information, we have another QR code that you can take a quick picture of and join and get more information about the All of Us program. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.